Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.
Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week we're joined by a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by Liz Toonkel, whose work includes Give Me Pity, Emily the Criminal, and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you for having me.
I guess my first question is about Marcel. How did you go about creating his world or designing for his world when he's so small?
Well, you know, it was really important to Dean, the director, that everything in Marcel's world came from our world, that there wasn't just these things that sort of appeared from nowhere. So it was kind of, you know, like a research process to see like, okay, what exists around us that would make sense at this scale and would also be functional for Marcel and his community. Also, Marcel doesn't have arms or hands, so everything that they would have taken, they would have to alter with their feet and with their mouths. So there was some like, there's a lot of thought into how would this thing be useful to them, and then how would they get it to where they needed it to be. So that was definitely like the first step, was just, you know, I feel like it'd be very easy to approach this project and just be like, oh, this thing looks super cute, let's put it next to Marcel. But it had to have like a functionality and a reason to be there, which made it like a much more rigorous design process. So that was sort of like where we started at.
Was there any particular object that you wanted to use or thing that you wanted to use? Because like you said, you thought it was cute, but you're like, it just doesn't work.
I feel like there was, but I can't quite remember. I'm trying to think. There's some things that we had made that didn't end up in the final movie. I know one thing I was very excited about, because there is this point in the film where Marcel almost gets like on stage and walks up these little stairs. And I was very excited about the idea of using a pack of Fruit Stripes gum as like stairs pulled out.
Yeah.
We made that, but I don't remember if we shot it, but it did not end up in the final product. I think it was always like an interesting balance too. Like, there was no like product placement or anything in this film, but there was definitely like, I wanted to have some real products because that's just true to our world. But a lot of those are sort of, you barely see them in the actual finished product. Like when they're dragging the like drunk bee in the garden, that's actually on like an Andes mint wrapper. Because I thought that was kind of like a perfect thing that would be the right size to pull a bee on, but in the finished product you can't even tell. So I think there were some things like that, but there wasn't like, I didn't get like fixated on one thing that we didn't end up using, or if I did, I don't remember it.
Now, I apologize if this is an ignorant question about production design, because I don't know a ton about production design, but what I view is that, you know, on a film you'd be working with the director closely, but in this situation when there might be something like small stop motion animation, do you work a lot with the animators as well, or is it still you and the director? How does that work?
I definitely think it's like the primary relationship is me and the director. Kirsten Lepore, who is the animation director on this film, her and I work together a lot because, you know, also the characters we were working with during the live action shoot were sort of prototypes. Like Nana Connie actually looked a bit different, but their sizing was the same. So it was kind of figuring out with Kirsten what would work from the live action shoot to the stop motion shoot. And there was also a huge archival process, because basically anything in a 3-foot radius of the characters had to be preserved or replicated to go to the stop motion stage. So there was a lot of time and thought put into translating from one aspect of the shoot to the other. In terms of working with like individual animators, I didn't really do that. There was like an art director who kind of like translated everything in the stop motion realm. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of traditional in the sense that Dean and I were the primary like collaborators in terms of the design.
And was everything sort of scaled up for the animators? So like the shell was larger than usual, or you guys all worked with actual?
No, so the only things that were scaled up were the like the bugs. So a lot of the bugs are actually puppets. And so like the bee bug was probably this big, the puppet. So that's like, I don't know, 10 inches, 8 inches, but then that got scaled down in post. But Marcel and Nana Connie and everything around them is true to scale.
Yeah, it's got this like fiction reality documentary style to it. So how did you go about merging those two worlds with production design?
I think it was just really important, like I was saying, that everything felt very true to our human world, even if it was in the shell world. So kind of keeping that truth to objects. And then it was, besides that, it was just sort of thinking, how do these two things kind of coexist? And I think that one of the aspects of the film that I find really beautiful is just that it asks us to sort of like pay attention to the detail and little things around us that we're kind of blocking out. And that's what I feel like narratively is exciting about Dean sort of discovering Marcel, is that probably many people have lived and or stayed at this Airbnb, and like nobody has noticed that there's this whole like micro world around them. So I feel like it was just exciting to think about what things we could sort of lift up and make you look at, like spider webs or dust, things like that.
What would you say was one of the challenges for you on this show that you had to tackle?
Well, one of the hardest things was, so you might not notice it when you watch the film, or hopefully you don't notice it, but everything besides the characters, like that moves on screen, we made move in the live action shoot. So we had to create basically all these practical effects, like make tennis balls zoom around rooms. We had to make, keychains go down ropes, and kitchen mixers move berries. And so that was a huge challenge, not only in figuring out how to make those things work, but also in sort of unpacking so instead of writing a script initially, Dean and Nick and Jenny made an animatic. So that's basically like storyboards of the whole movie with the audio. And so there was a lot of unpacking we had to do of that material to be like, oh, wait, this thing is moving and I have to figure out how to make it move, but no one's noticing that. So it was stuff like that. It was very like technical, just a lot of pulling things down and beating out every little thing that's happening on screen. So that was definitely the largest challenge.
Yeah, how the heck did you get the keychain to go down the rope? What was the trick?
So Jake Tremblay, my amazing art director, sort of spearheaded that one, I believe. And I think what we did was, I think we might have had it pulled with like, fishing line from underneath. I think we might have done it that way. And we may have also set up the rig so that it was at a higher point to a lower point so that it would naturally kind of progress down. But I will admit, I don't totally remember how we did that one.
Now, because like when I think about Marcel, like one of my questions was going to be like, what were your notes in the script? But you said you got an animatic first. So how did you take notes? Like, what was your process to get into the mind of Marcel and what his world was like?
Well, that's always like twofold as a production designer. So there's like the logistical technical aspect of it, which is sort of going through, they had written sort of like a translated script from the animatic. So going through the animatic and the script and breaking down everything that happens so we know what we need to do. And then there's also just the like, you know, visual conceptual side of it, which is like, okay, this all takes place in this house. What is this house? You know, and that process is always more like pulling a lot of reference images, doing research. I mean, when I came onto the film, Didnt had already found this house and sort of convinced the people who live there to let us shoot in it. So I already knew like the container, and then it was like, okay, how do we alter this container to make it work? Because it was tricky in the sense that, you know, the home was large, but like no home is ever large enough for filming. So there's always a lot of stuff that we need to take out of it and store. And then what things do we need to change because they're the wrong feeling? And what do we have to paint? We also had to build some false walls to kind of create, because the real home is a little bit more grandiose and like California feeling. And even though the film isn't like, it's not clear exactly where it takes place. And if you're in Angelino, you're like, oh, I recognize those street names. Didnt is from Virginia, and he wanted it to feel more like an East Coast kind of different kind of home, different kind of backyard. So we had to do a lot of things to bring in that feeling.
Interesting. So like you mentioned the house. So how did you, because he goes between the different rooms, I guess, different worlds. So like, what was your process for each of those worlds?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of fun because it was kind of like creating different feelings in each different room. And, you know, each different room plays such a different part in the story. So it was sort of like, I feel like a lot of times in the rooms, we'd sort of start with, where is Marcel going to be in these rooms? Are there any like shell created spaces, and almost work from micro to macro of like, how do we create a container that either juxtaposes or really like enhances the smaller things that we're seeing? So yeah, it was kind of different for each space.
I was saying, because you went from micro to macro, you know, how much was the original people's material and how much did you bring in and change?
Oh, of the home?
Yeah.
We changed a lot. It was actually pretty funny because Didnt had sort of like worked out this deal with the homeowners, and was like, oh yeah, they thought we were going to just shoot it exactly as it was. And we basically removed all of their furniture and brought in our own and repainted. And so I would say like certain rooms, like the kitchen, you know, 80% or maybe less, like 70% of that was there, like the wall color and obviously like the cabinets and the counters, but like everything on it, we basically brought in the island, we brought in stools, artwork. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, you know, we loved the bones of the house, but we would totally change what was in the rooms.
Now, is there a particular scene or moment that's your favorite from Marcel, or that you're most proud of?
I mean, there's a lot to love of the film. I think one thing that I really am proud of how it turned out was when Nana, Connie, and Marcel are eating dinner. I think that there's a really like strong relationship between their dining space and like the human dining space. I love the color palette. I also I had this idea because Marcel was going to be performing a song and kind of going on stage. And I really wanted to put like a painting inside this hutch. And I really love how that turned out. I feel like it really looks kind of like a theatrical backdrop. And that shot in the movie of Nana, Connie, and Marcel eating dinner was one of the most technically challenging of the film. We shot that with like a motion capture rig. So basically the camera was programmed a certain way so that it could be completely replicated in the stop motion shoot. So I'm just proud of how it turned out, because I feel like so many different people, like Bianca Klein, the cinematographer, and then Eric, the stop motion cinematographer, both like, I don't know, there are just so many people that had to come together to make that shot look the way that it does. And, you know, it's so interesting because I feel like it's such a feat of the movie that when you watch it, you don't really think about all the technical aspects, but something like that shot is so technically rigorous to pull off. So I'm very proud of how that looked.
Now, are you hoping that there'll be a spin-off or a prequel or anything like that to Marcel, so you can see his adventures some more?
I mean, I think whatever Dean and Jenny want, you know, I feel like they both care so much about the character that they've worked so hard to maintain, like, you know, their vision. And so I think like if they're excited about doing more with the character, then they should. But I don't know. I think that you never want to see something get like watered down or have too much content. So I think I feel like they've been really successful at striking that balance. So whatever they want to do with Marcel.
You know, as a production designer, is there a particular era or design movement that you follow or you're a fan of?
I mean, part of the reason that I love being a production designer is I feel like I constantly get to try new things and explore different time periods, different classes, different cultures. Like, I think that's really to me. So I like the diversity of that. I'm always very drawn to like 70s stuff or like really colorful things. Like that's sort of like my favorite look of things. But I feel like as I've gotten older and done this more, I really just like to try everything.
What is it about the 70s?
You know, I like bold patterns. I also just feel like, you know, that was a great, like, I feel like the era we're living in right now, unless you're very, very wealthy, most of the furniture and the things that you're buying is all like IKEA or kind of these like prefab. And so I feel like that was really like a great time period for furniture. So I feel like even no matter what era like I'm designing, I always like to have pieces from that because they feel like really well constructed and thought out. So yeah, I don't know. That's one of my draws to it.
I think I'm going to say, because whenever I think of the 70s, I grew up with orange shag carpet. So I was like, what is she like? But when you say the furniture, it totally makes sense now. Like, I still have 70s furniture. It's like really solid, good furniture and looks really unique.
I mean, I also love orange shag carpet. Like, I kind of love things that many people think are ugly. I love like, you know, I love the drapery from like the 50s through the 70s. Like, so part of the reason I'm like, oh, there isn't one time period that I'm really close to is I feel like the best design incorporates things from multiple time periods, because most people live in homes that have things they've gotten over time. And that's one of the things that I really like about being a designer versus like a production designer versus like an interior decorator is like, I like thinking about how people got what they have and the origin of that. And it's always like a bummer to me if I walk into a space and I'm like, this was all bought yesterday, because it feels like someone doesn't have a personal connection to their objects.
You must hate going to staged houses for when you're looking for
it's like a hard experience.
Now, we talked about, you know, like there's those sort of touchstones, like you said, like the drapes from the 50s or shag carpet from the 70s. But, you know, in those eras, it was very much like North America had a style, but Europe would have a different style. And they influenced each other, but we didn't have the internet and everything, so it wasn't the same way. So is there things that you've discovered in your research about other cultures that it's like their version of shag carpet, where people are like, that's shag carpet, you know, it's 270s or things like that?
I mean, that's a really great question. I feel like Um, I mean, I haven't really worked internationally or like on
Mhm.
projects that, I mean, I definitely think there are things like that that I've witnessed just like in terms of like things people will have in their kitchen or in their
Mhm.
homes, like more culturally based.
Mhm.
But I think that's a really great question, and I'm curious to really think about it the more I move forward. I mean, I did a film called The Vigil a number of years ago that was like a Hasidic horror film, and I'm Jewish, but like I'm not from the Hasidim, and it was a very illuminating experience because I sort of had this consultant who grew up in a Hasidic home, and so I got to learn a lot about what people of that culture have in their homes and like
Mhm.
the things that are both like necessary and then are also ornamental. So I think things like that are always like really illuminating and exciting.
Mhm. Now, I have one last question for you. We've been stuck in the pandemic for more than 2 years. During that time, you know, if you got COVID or you're quarantined for whatever reason, you're stuck inside, is there a show or a movie you discovered on streaming networks that people should check out?
I did rewatch The Sopranos because my partner had never watched it, and that was really exciting. And also, I really enjoy some of the design elements of that show. In terms of like newer shows that I watched, I really loved Severance. I highly
Oh yeah.
recommend that. Um, I feel like I haven't seen a show have such like theatricality
Mhm.
and like have the design be so woven into the storytelling. So I was really like excited about that. I also really liked Yellow Jackets because I'm
Yes.
a Lost fan and I love Christina Ricci. I was excited to see her have an amazing part again. So yeah, all those shows I highly recommend.
For Lost Jackets, the thing that's funny to me is I live in Toronto, so we're in the area where they're supposed to be have crashed. And what drives all the locals, like the Canadians, nuts is like where they crashed is very populated. so so they would have walked 10 minutes and bumped into someone. You know,
I mean,
so
that's kind of hilarious though, because I feel like they're supposed to be kind of like privileged teenage girls. So maybe
yeah.
that is what
Yeah,
they
exactly.
and they just didn't even realize.
Yeah.
But I mean, they don't like exactly say where it happened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Semi vague.
southern Ontario, but that's from where I live, Toronto to Montreal is the most populated area in Canada. So half of Canada's population is there in that
Oh
like
my gosh. Well, I really hope that's a plot point in season 2.
yeah,
That's
it probably is. They're probably like, why didn't we bump into people? So well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. I hope people go see the movie and thanks for having me.
Thanks. And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.
Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.